All right, today we're jumping into the mind of one of the 20th century's most challenging and I think most interesting theologians, Paul Tillich. We're going to explore his big project, trying to build a bridge between the Christian faith and our modern, often skeptical world, a challenge I know many of us in ministry are facing every single day. So let's start with the big one, the question that really drove everything for him. How do we make the Christian message sound like good news, not just to ourselves, but to people who think faith is irrelevant or outdated? How does it connect? That's what Tillich spent his whole life trying to figure out. And to really get his answer, you have to understand the man himself. His life wasn't quiet or simple. It was shaped by these huge, wrenching crises that forced him to live and think right on the boundary, that really tense, creative space between the church and the world, between faith and culture. I mean, just look at this life. Tillich was no academic locked away in an ivory tower. He starts in his traditional pastor's home, but then World War I completely shatters his worldview. He sees the collapse of a civilization. And later he stands up to the Nazis and has to flee his own country. It was these real-world experiences that birthed his whole idea of a theology of culture. And all this turmoil and experience, it led him to develop his signature move, his central strategy. He called it the method of correlation. And honestly, if you can get your head around this, you've unlocked the key to his entire way of thinking. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. See, for Tillich, theology isn't about the church just shouting doctrines at the world. No, it's a conversation. It starts by listening. What are the deep questions our culture is asking? What are the anxieties people feel? And only then, he says, can we show how the great symbols of our faith are the answers to those very questions. Okay, so theory is one thing, but how does this actually work? Let's put it to the test. We'll start with the first great question that he says comes from just being human, the problem of our finitude. Our deep awareness that we are vulnerable to meaninglessness, to guilt, and of course, to death. Tillich says we've all felt this. It's that gut-level anxiety, that feeling of being threatened by what he calls non-being. Think about moments of deep despair or when life just feels empty. It's terrifying, but at the same time, we feel this strange power inside us to hold on, to affirm our existence anyway. So the question becomes, where on earth does that power come from? And this is why we feel so fragile. According to Tillich, our very existence is this delicate balancing act. We need to be individuals, but we also need to belong to a community. We need passion and dynamism, but we also need structure and form. We need freedom, but we also have a destiny. When these poles get out of whack, when they pull too far apart, well, that's when we start to fall apart. So what's the answer? Where does that power to resist non-being come from? Well, here it is. It comes from God. But Tillich radically redefines what we mean by God. He says God isn't a being, not even the biggest, most powerful being on a long list of beings. No, God is being itself, the very ground, the source, the power that makes anything and everything exist at all. Okay, so that's the first question, our finitude. But Tillich doesn't stop there. He moves on to something maybe even more immediate for us. Not our potential to fall apart, but our actual lived experience of being alienated from God, from other people, and even from our own true selves. Now, he picks up these old words, fall and sin, but he gives them a new spin. For him, sin isn't primarily about breaking a divine rulebook. It's this deep existential condition of being estranged, of being cut off from who we were meant to be. And that brokenness leads to a cry from the heart. Where can we find the power to be whole again, the power for a new being? And the answer, the Christian answer, is found in the symbol of Jesus as the Christ. For Tillich, Jesus is the one who brings this very thing we're crying out for, the new being. He brings a reality of healing, of reconciliation, right into the middle of our messed up, estranged human situation. And this is a really big deal. He's saying the cross is not what many of us might think. It's not a cosmic legal transaction where God punishes Jesus instead of us. For Tillich, the cross is the ultimate picture of God entering into our suffering, diving into our alienation, to conquer it from the inside out with love. So you can see how he retunes this whole vocabulary of salvation, right? Justification isn't just a legal declaration. It's the profound experience of being accepted by God even when you feel unacceptable. Sanctification is the actual process of being healed and changed by this new being. And atonement is literally what it says, at one-ment, being made one again with God. Okay, I know what you might be thinking. This is all very philosophical, very heady stuff. But what does it have to do with us? What does all this complex thought mean for ministry right here, right now?
Well, his impact has been huge. I mean, he literally gave us a new way to talk about faith. That phrase, ultimate concern, to describe what religion is, that's Tillich. His whole theology of culture opened the door for amazing conversations between faith and psychology, art, politics, you name it. But, and this is a big but, his ideas are not easy to swallow for everyone, especially from an evangelical point of view. People push back, and they ask some really tough questions. Is this being itself just a fancy word for atheism? If Jesus is a symbol of the new being, does the man who actually walked in Galilee still matter? And the biggest one, in his method, does the culture end up rewriting the gospel? So, here's what I want you to take away from all this. You don't have to agree with everything he says. That's not the point. The value for our ministry is to see him as a dialogue partner, maybe even a sparring partner, who forces us to ask deep questions about how we communicate the timeless gospel in our very specific time and place. And that brings us right here to our final question. Tillich's great challenge is for us to become theologians of our own culture, to listen, really listen, to the deep questions being asked all around us, whether it's in the art, the politics, or just the daily anxieties of life in Lagos or Abuja. And then, to find fresh, compelling, authentic ways to show how Jesus Christ is the ultimate answer, the bringer of that new being that our world so desperately needs.